Hello folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero September 2023 kit. Of course, they always come in these great 8x10 zippered pouches. I'm not sure, but I think Hero Arts had a little bit of trouble getting all of the items together for this kit. It's Saturday the 16th, and my kit just came today. Let's plow through here, see what's inside of it. I think everybody has seen the previews so far. This is all a fall-themed kit for us this year. It is September. We'll dig right in. Our classic kit contains a 4x6-inch stamp set. This is a fall messages stamp set. Thank you, with gratitude. Happy sweater weather, sending my gratitude. Autumn greetings, season of thanks. Happy falls. This nice handwritten flowing calligraphy type font. We've got some little mushrooms and acorns and leaves, some little fall designs around those sentiments. And then we have 3 color layering stencils. So those are stencils A and B and C. And once you layer them all up, they will color not only this beautiful wreath, but also the coordinating fall window die. They match up perfectly. I think that's pretty close to how they go. Always a great kit thing to have these layering stencils and a matching window die. Then we have 4 core ink cubes. As usual, when they give us layering stencils, they'll give us some ink cubes to go along with them. This is espresso, caramel, cherry, and spicy mustard. 4 of those. Those are all core inks. We also get 8 clear card panels, which are just basically 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch sheets of acetate. Obviously thinking that we're going to use that window die to make shaker cards with. So there's 8 clear card panels there, great pieces of acetate. And last but not least, a unicorn white lacquer pen, a white lacquer pen. White lacquer pens are always good. I know that they gave these to us specifically so we could put white dots on the mushrooms in our die here. It looks like we got so much stuff in the classic kit this month. But of course, there is also the premium kit. The premium additions to this kit include another 4x6-inch stamp set, Autumn Critters. So it looks like there's a little badger and a bear and a fox and I don't know, maybe that's a bunch of foxes. We've got a little fire down here. There's some sentiments on this as well. Thank you. Let's dance like the leaves in the wind. I'm doing a happy dance. You make my heart sing. Leave your worries behind. Look, even their small pun. And, of course, we get matching dies. And there's even some extra little image dies here. A few leaves and a little mushroom that aren't specifically for any parts of this. But we do have the pumpkin die. Looks like we have the fire die. And, of course, all of the critters. So 2 die sets, 2 stamp sets, and we also get 2 sheets of bronze glitter paper. And then last but not least, a full-size ink pad of contour ink, Hero Arts contour ink. This is kind of a light gray. This is specifically created for no-line coloring. So you stamp your stamps with this and then color it, and the lines virtually disappear with whatever color medium you're using. That's our September 2023 Hero Arts My Monthly Hero Classic and Premium Kit. It's been a hot, muggy summer here in New York City, so I welcome fall wholeheartedly. Let's dig in. And here we have our 10 cards for the month. Everything's on a white card base, except looks like there's one shaped card in there, maybe? So as usual, I will make my first 5 cards using only the classic kit. Now there's lots of sentiments there, but the only image is revealed by the stencils and the window dies. So let's dive into those. For card number 1, we have sending my gratitude. Now for this, I took the layering stencils and the included ink cubes, and I ink blended the stencils on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of Hero Hues ivory cardstock. Especially with a fall-themed kit like this, I find it a little less jarring to ink blend on top of a lightly colored cardstock instead of just straight on white. It kind of blends everything a little more, I think. I am happy to say that lining up the layering stencils was quite easy, even without using the window die. I used all 4 colors of the ink cubes and did some selective stenciling with small ink blending brushes to get a little bit of color variety on the leaves and the mushrooms. I used spicy mustard for all of the mushroom stems, cherry and caramel for the leaves on stencil A, spicy mustard for the shrooms, that's the shroom details, caramel for the leaves on stencil B, and cherry for the mushroom tops, and espresso for all the leaf details with stencil C. Looks like I have to be a little careful with that espresso ink. It's rich and quite dark. So I stamped the sentiment then using espresso ink, and I tried to do a little embossing with it. It didn't take the embossing powder too good. That ink is, of course, a dye ink and not a pigment ink, but I did do a little clear embossing on that. I ink blended the caramel ink around the edges, and then I kind of went to town with the lacquer pen, unicorn white lacquer pen. And here, again, I have to be careful with the lacquer pen because of bubbles at the tip. Nothing worse than getting a beautiful round embellishment on your mushroom and then it pops and leaves a little flat dot. And finally, we have some autumnal sequins from my stash. Adds a little extra bling to the card. That finished panel is then glued down to a white A2 card base. Okay, I might have overdid it with the enamel dots a little bit, but I think those layering stencils work beautifully, even without that die cut. So let's pair up those layering stencils with the fall window die. And we have a shaker card that says, thank you. It is so easy to line up those stencils with the window die. This time, I thought I'd just use a single color for each stencil. I used spicy mustard ink for the stencil A, caramel ink for stencil B, and cherry ink for stencil C. I did do a little bit of shading, like darker on the bottom and lighter on the top with the inks, and I'm kind of amazed at how well this stencil works with just these 3 colors. I believe this color combo is the one illustrated on heroarts.com, illustrating how that layering stencil goes together. I remember hearing someone say that the Hero Arts clear card panels, acetate, will take heat embossing with no problem. So I stamped the sentiment on one of the clear panels using root beer reactive ink and embossed that with clear embossing powder. Move quickly when embossing on acetate. I don't think there's an acetate in the world that wouldn't warp a little bit with too much heat. And then I glued that to the back of the stenciled fall window die. I glued a plain panel of my ivory cardstock, which is obviously darker than the Hero Hues ivory cardstock, to the front of an A2 card base, and I glued a few sequins directly onto that card base, just so when the shaker bits are at the bottom, there's still a couple of sequins in that window. I added a double layer of foam tape around the back of the acetate window die and selected more autumnal sequins to use as the shaker bits and attach the window to the card base. Now you will notice that I restrained myself with the lacquer dots this time, and they seem much cleaner. I will often make a whole bunch of enamel or lacquer dots on a nonstick craft sheet in a variety of sizes, let them dry, and then pop them off and glue the dots in place on my card. This is actually, these down here are actually the unicorn enamel dots. That works really well and almost always prevents you making a mess on your beautiful card front with a burp from your lacquer pen. I know. I often feel like shaker cards aren't that big of a deal, but card recipients are always fascinated by them. It's a fairly simple little bit of interactive movement that people love to receive. And you don't have to go fancy with your ink blending to get terrific coloring on this window die. I really appreciate my restraint on this card. I think that looks great. Thank you. So that's the stencils alone, the stencils with the window die. How about the window die and no stencils? So we have a happy fall. Remember, you can dry emboss a die without actually cutting it for a classy texture. This is very much kind of a letterpress effect on the front of your cards. So I embossed the window die on a panel of Canson mixed media cardstock, and that gave us this lovely detailed wreath of leaves and mushrooms on a lightly textured cardstock that not only looks amazing, but feels terrific too. I love that texture. I stamped the sentiment in the center with intense black ink and colored the little bits with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I glued the panel to the front of an A2 card base, added a gold leaf sequin from my stash to fill in the bottom of the opening, and add a touch of sparkle, clean and classy. You know how much I like my white space. Happy fall. So I wanted to hand color one of the fall window dies. You know, stencils are handy and quick, but you'll never achieve as much detail as something that's been colored by hand. And we have Autumn Greetings. Ooh, that's what I'm talking about. I decided to color this die with my Prismacolor colored pencils, so I cut the window die from a piece of Stonehenge white cardstock. That's my favorite cardstock for colored pencils, and I started coloring. There's lots of tiny images here, so I did keep the points of my pencils very sharp. So much detail and color variations are possible with colored pencils. I also, and I haven't done this hardly ever at all, I used some Gamsol mineral spirits and paper stomps to blend the coloring. The final result here was worth every minute it took to color. I played around with what to put in the window. At one point, I was going to have a black background with a white sentiment, but while that certainly made the coloring pop, it also seemed just a little too dark. I came up with this black shadowing by die cutting the window die on a panel of Hero Arts pitch black cardstock, and then I cut away about 1/4 of an inch from the center of the die cut, top and bottom, and then just slid the two sides together, and that gave us this nice kind of a reflecting shadow on either sides of the cut. Just what the doctor ordered. Gives us a nice little pop to those colored pencils as well. I stamped the sentiment on the front of an A2 card base with intense black ink. I did emboss that with clear embossing powder, and I colored all of the bits with my Zig markers. Those brush tips on those Zig watercolor markers are fine enough to handle any tiny image, especially like these. I glued the color window and the shadow to the card front, and I didn't think it needed any lacquer dots or additional bling of any kind. You don't want to distract from that coloring. Like I said, totally worth the extra time. Autumn Greetings. So I thought these kind of gave the die and the stencils a pretty good run for their money. I was looking for something a little different to do for card number 5, so I came up with a shaped card. A leaf-shaped card fits the bill, and this says Autumn Greetings again. Look at the shine on that baby. So I turned to my silhouette portrait to cut out and create this card. I took a simple leaf shape and enlarged it to card base size. This is right at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I cut 3 copies of that from some of my craft cardstock. 2 copies were glued together for the card front. The 3rd copy was scored across the top, folded, and the flap glued to the card front. So I knew I was going to add a writing surface on the inside so I didn't double up the cardstock on the back. I stamped the sentiment using intense black ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. I added a suggestion of veins and outlined the leaf with an alcohol marker and colored the stamp's bits with a very, very sharp colored pencil. Instead of adding sequins or jewels for bling, I grabbed some gold hero wax and applied it lightly to the card front with a finger. I felt that worked really well for what's supposed to be a leaf. And that was just the finishing touch that this card was asking for. This card also, of course, stands up on its own. Voila. And I did stamp, so it stands on those 2 points there. So I did stamp the greeting so it lined up with those 2 points. So when you put it on your desk, it's actually not standing on your desk with the greeting going like that. I did think about it. If you'd like my pattern for this leaf card, just send me a request at cardcutups@gmail.com. Specify if you'd like this pattern as a silhouette file or as a simple PDF, and I'll pass that along to you as soon as I can. Autumn greetings with a nice autumn leaf card. So now we get to break into our premium kit supplies and those terribly cute critter stamps. Now we also got a big ink pad of contour ink. Now this is specially formulated for no-line watercoloring on your stamps. I figured I'd give that a whirl, and that gave us our next card here, and we have Sending Hugs. I decided this critter was a gray wolf, and his arms spread wide seemed to be begging for a hug. So I stamped him on some Bristol Smooth cardstock using the contour ink, and I watercolored him using my Zig watercolor markers and a small paintbrush. Now, I'm not a big practitioner of this method, but I think it came out nicely. I do like the furry texture I was able to receive. That's totally thanks to those little bitty markers. But I think these are fairly small image stamps, and they make no-line watercoloring a bit of a challenge. It's easy to lose some details if you're not paying close attention. So after all the watercolor was dry, I die cut them out with the matching fancy die. I cut a panel of craft cardstock to 3 by 4 1/4, added some finger swipes of the gold hero wax along the edges, and glued a thin pitch black mat behind. I die cut some of the bronze glitter paper with the Hero Arts Nesting Infinity Circle die, and I cut a pitch black mat using the next larger die to glue to the back. I stamped the sentiment using intense black ink and glued the background of the mat to a white A2 card base, glued the circle dies on top of the background, and added our critter with foam tape. That bronze glitter paper and gold hero wax gives us plenty of shine on this card, so no embellishments needed. I think these critters are cute enough to stand on their own. No fancy scene required. Sending hugs. Now, I often hesitate to use my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers to color small images just because I don't think the tips on those markers are very fine or fine enough to get into all those tiny spaces. But if I'm really very careful, we might get "You Make My Heart Sing." The sentiments in this stamp sets are what dictated which critters I would use. The guitar playing fox goes with this sentiment perfectly. I stamped him on some Bristol Smooth cardstock with intense black ink, and I colored him up with my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers. He kind of reminds me of Robin Hood with that green tunic. Here's a quick shot of the alcohol marker colors I used on our musical fox. I die cut him with the matching fancy die, and I set about creating a background. I remembered I had this old Derice music die. Here it is in my stash. I thought that might provide an interesting background. I die cut that from some craft cardstock and realized that the die is completely backwards. This is how it should read, but the cut side is standing up. This is upside down treble clef. The stems on the notes should be pointing up. This is just backwards. Now, this way Now that is correct. That's absolutely correct. But this, of course, shows the unattractive back cut. So I figured I could just excise the treble clef and leave it at that and use the nice pretty front side of that die cut. So I die cut a piece of ivory cardstock with a 3 3/4 by 5-inch Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die, and I splattered some espresso ink on that before adding a thin champagne metallic matte to the back. I glued those both to an A2 card base and glued my music staff in the center. I die cut a bunch of these small hearts from the Hero Arts Nesting Infinity Heart dies. That's the smallest heart die from the champagne metallic cardstock, and I glued those on top of the notes on the staff. I added the fox with some foam tape and scattered a few more hearts around for good measure. Hearts, music, notes, guitar, all work perfectly with this sentiment, "You make my heart sing." I love this, even though these notes are actually wrong. If the notes were pointing up, the stems should be on the right side, not the left side of the notes. Technically backwards, but I imagine, or I hope, most folks won't notice. You make my heart sing with our merry Robin Hood fox. So now then, other than hugging and playing music, it appears that dancing is a favorite activity for these critters. Now we have, "I'm doing a happy dance. Congrats!" A big congrats card featuring that bear stamp. Now we know this critter is a bear. I was eager to see if I could make this a black bear. Again, I stamped him with some intense black ink on some Bristol Smooth cardstock. Here's a shot of the colors I used for the black bear. He's quite dapper in his red and green jacket. Again, I used the matching fancy die to cut him out. Now this sentiment didn't seem to mean much without a qualifier, so I dug out this Lawn Fawn scripty congrats die from my stash. I've had this for a long time. I think this is available. I'll link to it on my website if you'd like to know. I die cut that from a piece of cardstock that I had colored with the same alcohol markers as the bear, so that the bear matched our little sentiment here. I die cut 3 more of these from pitch black cardstock. I glued all the layers together, and using embossing and watermark inked, I embossed the whole sentiment with clear embossing powder. You can see that good there. I do find embossing powder is a much easier way to add shine to a die cut sentiment than with glossy accents. It's just so much easier. I die cut another piece of the Canson mixed media cardstock with a 3 1/4 by 4 1/2-inch Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. I added a glossy black cardstock matte behind that and glued them both to an A2 card base. I stamped the sentiment with intense black ink, glued the die-cut sentiment in place, and added the bear with foam tape. Another little glossy black heart glued next to the sentiment, and some motion lines around the bear's hand and knee and elbow finishes out our dancing bear. Who remembers Dancing Bear with Captain Kangaroo? I'm doing a happy dance. Congrats. I'm very happy for you. Okay, we have 2 more critters to go. I decided that a couple could be dancing together. And there is one more dancing sentiment in this stamp set. And we have, "Let's dance like the leaves in the wind." Now here's another use for that contour ink pad. Just use it as a light gray ink. I stamped all the leaf stamps on a panel of white cardstock to give us a nice autumnal background. I stamped the sentiment on the background with intense black ink, and I did emboss that with some clear embossing powder. I added a thin black mat and glued those to an A2 card base. So I stamped the badger on some Bristol Smooth cardstock. I masked off his hand and then stamped the squirrel. Seems like a squirrel tail to me. So it looks like they're holding hands. Here's a picture of the markers I used to color this pair, and when I was done, I used partial die cutting to cut them both out together. it kind of looks like this is all one stamp. I lightly blended a little cherry and spicy mustard on a scrap of white cardstock and die cut these 3 leaves using the Leaf Fancy dies. I attached our dancing couple using a mini action wobbler, so they actually move, they dance. The wobbler is behind the badger, so the squirrel bounces up and down quite a bit. I like that. I glued the die cut leaves around the dancers, and here we have another interactive card. These critter stamps are truly adorable. I just love these two dancing together. Let's dance like the leaves in the wind. So there are a few Leaf Fancy dies left, so I thought I'd pair them up with the one nice pun in this set, and we have Leave your worries behind. So I got the Leaf Fancy dies from Craft Red, Yellow, Orange, and the Bronze Glitter cardstocks. I die cut another 3 1/4 by 4 1/2 inch panel of ivory cardstock with the Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die and splattered that all over with all 4 of our ink colors. So there's that spicy mustard and that cherry espresso and caramel are splashed all over the back. I glued that background down to a craft mat and then down to a white A2 card base. I decided where I wanted the sentiment and I stamped that with the espresso ink. Then it was a simple matter of gluing the leaves in place and enjoying the swirl of leaves as we head into fall. I did think about doing some ink blending on the leaves, but I thought the detail of the dies provided plenty of interest, and I like the real graphic nature of the plain colored leaves, especially when paired with that bronze glitter cardstock. A nice graphic card to wrap up this colorful fall kit. And that wraps up my 10 cards using the My Monthly Heroes September 2023 Classic and Premium kits. Now, though I didn't use every single stamp and die, I did use a little bit of everything. There was so much in this kit. The fall window die is pretty spectacular and is made all of the simpler with the layering stencils, and my affection for these critters grew more each time I colored one. This is a fun, unique collection of cards. It seems I was certainly in the mood to do some coloring this month. And I like the autumn feel here without everything having to be just about the season. These kits are still available at Hero Arts. If you see something you like here, or if I've managed to spark some ideas of your own and you'd like to grab a kit for yourself, hop on over to Hero Arts. Remember, Hero Arts has started offering the premium elements if you're especially drawn to the critters and don't particularly care for the fall window die. There's lots of options here. If you do go shopping at Hero Arts, please use my links in the description down below. It helps support this channel and is always truly appreciated. Thank you for sharing some time with me here today. It never goes unnoticed. Please remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all your crafty friends. Oh, hell, all of your friends. I am getting ready to go on a much needed vacation. So my October 10 cards, 1 kit posting might be a little bit delayed, but I will get that to you as soon as possible. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Don't run with scissors. And I send you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.